He has brought 17 years of litigation experience to the Mass Tort Section. And Frank, I also understand you're a Crimson Tide Alabama fan, so welcome to Ringler Radio.
Roll Tide. Glad to be here.
Roll Tide, you got that right. Okay, well, let me ask you this, Frank. We've had previous shows here on Ringler Radio discussing Actos and its litigation. So can you give us a little refresher, an overview of Actos and its potential link to bladder cancer? How did this all begin?
Well, from the player's perspective, it began even before the drug came onto the market. And Upjohn even considered marketing this drug at some point in time, but they looked at the safety profile and they decided that there were too many risks associated with the drug to even market it. So Takeda decided to go ahead and market the drug itself, and over time we saw several studies that came out indicating that the drug would cause or increase the risk of bladder cancer.
Interesting.
Frank, there's been federal and state Actos lawsuits over the years. Will this settlement be the first big payout to the claimants?
That is correct. Up till this point, there have been a lot of trials, and we can go over those if you'd like, but there has not been any payments made to any of the claimants as of this day.
Well, Takeda made more than $16 billion on Actos, and prior to it going generic in 2012, that's quite a bit of money. Talk to us about this industry, this tremendous money being made in the industry.
Well, of course, Actos, for our listeners, diabetes medication, and it's this particular segment of drug is in the glitazone area, and there have been other glitazones on the market other than Actos that you are probably familiar with. The first one was Revlin, and that was one of the first cases I ever worked on when I got to the Allen Law Firm back in 2001, 2002, and Revlin was a diabetes medication in the glitazone family, like Actos, and it was withdrawn from the market because of the serious risk of injury to your liver. And several years later, we saw another member of the glitazone family, Avandia. And that drug was manufactured by GlaxoSmithKline, and it was associated with an increased risk of heart attacks. And although it's still on the market, that litigation that went on for a few years before it resolved. So, now we've seen all three members of this particular segment of diabetes medications take large hits in the litigation. So my advice to diabetics is to stick with some of the older medications.
I hear you.
Frank, after all these years, a settlement has finally reached 9,000 or so claimants that the complaints. The key pharmaceutical company agreed to a $2.4 billion settlement. Can you talk a little bit about that particular settlement?
Yeah, well, the first thing that, of course, has got to happen before you have settlement in most of these mass torts, so you've got to have some trials take place, and that has been going on since 2013. We had several trials that year. In April 2013, a California jury awarded $6.5 million to the plaintiff. In September of 2013, a Maryland jury awarded $1.7 million to the plaintiff in that case. In December of 2013, a Nevada jury ruled for a defendant, as did a Cook County jury in May 2014. But in between those, you had a $2 million verdict in Philadelphia and a $9 billion verdict on behalf of the plaintiff in the MDL first bellwether trial in April of 2014. And that is what brought the defendant to the negotiation table.
Well, why don't you tell our audience what goes into negotiating a settlement such as one on this scale? What's the process? It's such a huge undertaking.
Well, I think probably what happened in MDL, there were two centers of litigation. One in the MDL in the Western District of Louisiana and one in Chicago. And both of those litigations had equal amount in them, about 4,000 apiece. There was one trial in Chicago that was a defense verdict, and the trial in the MDL resulted in the $9 billion verdict. Engineer in Texas tried that case, and so that brings them to the table. At that point in time, I think Takeda realized, we got some issues here. There was some significant problems they had with destruction of documents and spoliation of evidence. And that is what made the jury get so mad in that case. Ultimately, the MDL judge reduced that down to $36.8 million, but that is really significant that she left almost $28 million in punitive damages in place in that case because of the evidence presented in that Bellwether trial. At that point, I think Decatur decided they needed to get serious. Now, over the last year, they reached out to Mark Lanier and actually one of my partners, Andy Birchfield, who was one of the people who negotiated the buyout settlement of $5 million several years ago. And this settlement is very similar to the buyout deal in the way that it came about. And that's been going on over about the last year. Both sides are looking at objective criteria. What was important to the defendants? How do you weigh these cases? And of course, you started off with injuries and the age of individuals. Did somebody have, first you got to have bladder cancer. Did they die? Was the bladder removed? Did they undergo radiation or chemo? What was the dosaging of the drug is very important. And then some things that can take away from the settlement are, if you were a smoker or a former smoker or exposed to toxic materials. But once all that was agreed on, then you could start talking about dollars and cents. And that took a pretty long time. And they basically undertook to do a clinical trial on some of the cases that they had information on using the factors that they had agreed upon.
So we actually to the settlement approach.
Well, I think it's very good. We're trying to look at a lot of different things. We're looking at all these factors to go into it, but one of the factors was obviously the spoilation of evidence. Another factor was that the drug is still on the market. So we wanted it to be the largest average settlement, and I'm going to say average for each individual involved. They won't all get the same amount of money because they'll all have to go through the process. But Decatur needed to pay a higher amount than anybody else because of the spoliation issue, and that is what was accomplished with the settlement.
Well, it's amazing how spoliation, almost any trial, inflames juries. And, boy, that's kind of the bellwether, ringing the bell for most of these cases. Well, let's take a quick break right now and be back in a minute with more on Ringler Radio with my guest, Frank Woodson, and of course my co-host, Keith Christie. Welcome back.
This is Ringler Radio from Ringler Associates, the leader of the structured settlement profession nationwide. Did you know that Ringler is involved in a third of all structured settlement cases in the country? Ringler Associates works with all the parties in a lawsuit settlement to find the best possible financial solution for the people involved. There's a Ringler Associate in all the major cities of the U.S. No one has more experience than a Ringler Associate. Check out our new website at www.ringlerassociates.com for the best information for claimants, legal professionals, and claims personnel, and to find the Ringler Associate nearest you. When it's your interest at stake in a lawsuit settlement, you want only the best financial plan. You can count on Ringler Associates to structure a customized plan that meets the needs of you and your family for the future. Visit ringlerassociates.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Ringler Radio, everyone. Glad you joined us. I'm your host, Larry Cohen. Today I'm joined by my co-host, Keith Christie from New Orleans. And we're talking with our special guest, attorney Frank Woodson of the Beasley Allen Law Firm in Alabama. So, Frank, in 2011, the Food and Drug Administration and the FDA issued a safety communication regarding the potential link between Actos and bladder cancer, which the lawsuit claimed was 7 years after the company first discovered a potential link between Actos and bladder cancer. Tell us about that gap, and tell us about all that.
Sure. Well, there were three primary studies that are most cited by the plaintiffs in these cases regarding Actos' association with bladder cancer. But the foremost study that led to the FDA warning was a 10-year study conducted by Kaiser Permanente in California. The study was sponsored by Takeda, but it was required by the FDA. And it started in 2002 after preclinical trials indicated an increase in urinary bladder tumors in rats. So that is what put it all into place. And that study ran for 10 years, and that analysis of that study was the basis for the FDA's 2011 label change requirement.
Frank, why hasn't Actos been pulled off the market or recalled or black box?
Well, what we're talking about now is it has not been pulled in this country, but there was a study that came out in Europe, and they all sort of follow each other. And in June of 2011, the French regulatory agency, after they saw another study coming out about the connection between bladder cancer and lactose, announced that it did suspend the use of lactose in France. And Germany quickly followed suit. And then Takeda formally withdrew lactose from a lot of the markets worldwide around that time period. And then, at that point in time, that was almost over 50% of Takeda's gross revenue for their company. And about that also at the same time, the drug was going generic. So the drug had very little, if any, market at this point in time. And I don't know if the FDA, what their thinking is. They're just thinking it's not even worth making it, and maybe it's still open for some people to think for short periods of time. And but I can't answer the question. That's why they haven't made a withdrawal.
Interesting. Well, what is your opinion, Frank, on how the FDA regulates the pharmaceutical and drug prescription industry, and how can they improve what they do so far? How do you feel about the FDA?
Well, the FDA, in their defense, when we go and try a lot of these cases, the defendants like to go and tell us, listen, the FDA is the gold standard in the world in regulation of medication, and they're making sure that everything is safe. In fact, when you look at what the government says about the FDA, they are totally underfunded, and they are completely understaffed, and they just do not have enough people and resources to do the job that we call on them to do. And then sometimes we discover in these information can be hidden from them, or information can be, as they say, sometimes statistics can lie. Statistics can be changed and worded in such a way that the risk is not seen. So it's a very difficult job, it's a demanding job, and what they need is more funding and more resources.
That's interesting. Essentially, the pharmaceutical companies, what should they do if they start discovering that a drug that they're producing is causing individual harm?
Okay, well, that's a great question from this particular instance. As we said earlier in the interview today, another pharmaceutical company, Upjohn, they came along back in the 1990s and they reviewed the safety data with regard to lactose. And that drug company said, well, based on what we're seeing, we think the risk profile of this drug is too dangerous to sell, and we're not going to do it. And in fact, when we talked earlier about the documents that have been destroyed, the interaction between Takeda and Upjohn, Takeda had destroyed all the documentation coming back from Upjohn talking about the risk associated with the drug. The reason the plaintiffs knew about those documents, Upjohn had not destroyed them and got them. So Upjohn answers your question. That is what they're supposed to do. Just, you're going to have to walk away with it, away from marketing a drug if it's too dangerous to give to people.
So it's a moral standard.
Period. There you go. And what you're looking at, of course, in all these things is risk and benefit. And at that point in time, in the late 1990s, there were other medications that are already on the market treating diabetics. Is this drug going to provide something new and less risk, or is it going to provide, or is the benefit of the drug so strong that some additional increased risk are okay? Upjohn decided that this thing is way too risky from what we're seeing, and we're not going in that direction. Takeda decided to go in the other direction.
Well, that those poster children for how to act, you're saying Upjohn did the right thing. I remember when Johnson & Johnson did something with Tylenol. Similarly, there are certain companies that whose management and leadership has them do the right thing, and then there are others, obviously, who are less forthcoming. So it's, I guess the FDA has to be more vigilant, and it's up to plaintiff attorneys like your firm and yourself to continue to hold the feet to the fire. So with that, in closing, how do you feel and how do you think this settlement is going to impact future pharmaceutical prescription drug cases?
Well, what I'm hoping is that there was enough of a message sent that we cannot stand to have these companies destroy records. That was the most disturbing thing I think we saw in this case. As far as the settlement itself, it's good that people will get compensated on an objective basis. It was still done in a fair way, even for Takeda.